Hey, what's up? Ryan McCulloch of NextGenerationMusicSessions.com. Do you want to know what a diminished chord is, how to play it on the guitar, and how it's most frequently used in music? Well, you're in luck, because in today's video, I'm going to show you all three of those things coming up next. The diminished chord. So in rock and pop music, the diminished chord is infrequently used. Why? Well, it has to do with the style of rock and pop, and it also has to do with how the diminished chord is made, or the intervals that comprise a diminished chord. So let's attend to the first observation. So rock and pop music tends to favor root position chords. That is, chords that have the root as the lowest note in the bass. Diminished chord is made up of all minor thirds, and if you look at the fifth in the diminished chord, the fifth is a diminished fifth. Unsurprisingly, it's called a diminished chord for very good reason. So what that means, especially if you're a guitar player, that you're going to take the power chord that you're used to playing and lower that second note 1 fret lower on the adjacent string. So rather than being 2 frets up on the adjacent string, it's just going to be 1 fret up. And that interval right there has 3 different names: the diminished fifth, the tritone, and the augmented fourth. It's because it is, quite frankly, the most unstable interval in music, well, in the tempered system. So it is just really, really unstable, and it's one of the reasons that you can throw any sort of tension on top of a dominant 7th chord. It is just ready to topple at any second. So we don't use a diminished chord in rock and pop music for those 2 reasons. Hey, what's up? If you're into this topic, that is diminished chords, or you're into guitar and music theory and where the two meet, smash the thumbs up button on this video. We'd love to bring you more content, and if you have any questions about any of the stuff we're coming out with, or if you have any suggestions on topics for me to cover or anything like that, leave it in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from your thoughts and how you're gaining value from this information. Let's talk about the diminished chord. Oh, but before I do, for those of you who are curious, this is a Taylor 324 CE. I am not sponsored by Taylor. They're not paying me to say this. I absolutely love this guitar. I bought it this summer, and I have been absolutely blown away by its sound. It's one of the few guitars I've played in a really long time where you can put it on your lap and start playing, and it just feels like it's coming to life. It's very vibrant and resonant. So I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to find out more about the Taylor 324 CE. Diminished chords, here we go. So that's a little etude that I wrote for my students, I don't know, probably 4 years ago now. And the gist was, to use triads to come up with both chords and a melody. If you haven't figured out already, I'm a big fan of triads to comp chords. And if you haven't seen my triad videos, here's a link right here to start watching some of those so you can get caught up to speed on the G major inversion triads. So basically, this etude, the first phrase I'll kind of skip over, but the second phrase makes use of some diminished chords, and in very typical ways. So the second phrase begins like this. You've got your root position G, and you play like this. So whenever possible, I'm going to use this picking pattern. So down on the D and G strings, and then down on the B string as an open string, and then whatever the note is on the B string is an upstroke. So down, down, up, down, down, up. And that's a really interesting pattern because in 6, it goes against the subdivision. So down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, like that. 6. The important thing here as far as diminished chords go is how they're being used in the midst of this chord progression. So the second chord here is an F diminished chord in first inversion, meaning the third of the chord is in the bass. The A flat is the lowest note in this chord. A minor. And then you've got a G diminished chord where the third is in the bass again, and then it resolves to a G. So the important thing here is not necessarily that you're using diminished chords, but how they're being used. And I don't know if I've made this point clear enough, but a diminished chord is an incredibly unstable chord because of the diminished fifth that occurs between the outside two notes, right? So the root here in this case, which is the upper note, and the fifth, which is the lower note in this case. But if you want to play it in root position like that, is often how it'll be played. If you're a guitar player and you're playing it, you normally will play a root and then a fifth. So this interval right here, this diminished fifth, incredibly unstable interval, as I've said before. Am I repeating myself? I think I am. Yeah, so it's incredibly unstable. And basically, the reason for emphasizing this point is because you have two stable chords, a root position G and a root position A minor. The diminished chord is placed in between the two, so it's used almost as like a bridge, you know, between the two chords. So we think of these chords, these diminished chords, as what we call passing chords. And I use this analogy with my students. Imagine you're going on a road trip. Let's just say you're going from your hometown to, I don't know, Washington State. Unless your hometown is somewhere in Washington State. But that's beside the point. So let's say you're going from your hometown to Washington State, and that's your destination, right? You are going to probably stop for gas depending on where you're coming from. And that gas station is not a destination. That's the place where you want to fill up on gas, you want to grab some coffee, maybe some beef jerky, and some corn nuts, and get on the road as quick as humanly possible, because we don't hang out at gas stations. We just, it's utility. It's the same thing here. You don't hang out here. I've been to plenty of jam sessions, and I've never been to one where someone says, hey, let's do a diminished chord jam. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. All right, here's another situation. Check this out. Let's say I'm playing a blues, right? That bar right there, bar number 6. You'll often hear people play a diminished chord in that bar number 6. So that's what we call a sharp 4 diminished chord. Why the heck do we call it sharp 4? Well, because I was just playing a blues in G, and that blues, 1, G is the 1 chord in that case, and then you go to the 4 chord, which is going to be C. Sharp 4 is going to be C sharp, that's right. Why is it not D flat? Because D is the 5th, that's why. And harmonicism is going to kill you guys, I just know it. No, really, so sharp 4 is C sharp in this case, and it's in this case I played what's called a fully diminished chord. So a fully diminished chord is slightly different than just a regular diminished chord. A regular diminished chord is going to be a triad, 3 notes, right? So if you just play a regular C sharp diminished, that is a triad C sharp diminished, you're going to be playing C sharp E and G, so C sharp E, G. And beyond that, when you add another note, when you add another third to that chord, from the 5th, you could either add a B, which would make it a half diminished chord, very lovely sounding half diminished chord you often get in jazz and all of these other things, or you'll get a fully diminished chord, which is when you take that B and you lower it another half step and you get this wha-bam, fully diminished sharp 4 chord. delightful. But finally, what is a diminished chord? So we've been through two instances where we've used diminished chords. One is a passing chord in that in the instance of that etude that I wrote, and that was a triad. And then there's the sharp 4 diminished chord, frequently, though not always, used as a fully diminished 7th chord. I didn't talk about the half diminished chords that are used pretty frequently in things like minor 2/5s and jazz. But, you know, maybe a second video, sequel, anyone? We'll see. But what I thought I would do to close out the video is to show you how to figure out how to play whichever type of diminished chord you'd like to use for your songs or songs that you're learning how to play. So, without further ado, I need a guitar. Here we go. So let's just say that you've got some sort of root anywhere, right? So I'm gonna say this G right here, because we all know and love this G, right, from our G major chord. So I'm going to take that G, that's my root. You go up a minor 3rd, that is 3 frets. It's also the very first interval in your minor pentatonic scale, if you're familiar with that. You go up 3 frets, that is your minor 3rd. From there, you go up another minor 3rd. It would be difficult for you to do it on the same string. You could, especially if you want to play this as a chord, I would suggest playing it on an adjacent string. So going minor 3rd on the adjacent string. So in this case, that'll be G, B flat, D flat. That gives you the 3 notes for your diminished triad. Okay, cool. Now, if you want to make a diminished, and so before I move on, so that diminished triad looks like that. You can invert this thing so that it looks a whole bunch of different ways, right? So you go root 3rd, 5th, 3rd, 5th, root, like that. And I just applied octave equivalents here, so there are my G's, there's my other root, 3rd, 5th, root. And then you could do 5th, root, 3rd. There we go, there we have it. And that's just if you're doing closed position voicing, so you can throw the notes around a little bit more and spread them out. It's something to play around with. Now let me get to the 7th chords for the diminished 7th, because 7th chords are so colorful. They're just so colorful. All right, so look at this. So if you go root 3rd, 5th, and then you have the 7th, which will look like this. Here's the 7th, minor 7th in this case. So this will give you a G half diminished chord, right? That chord right there. Half diminished because you're playing a minor 7th in that case. If you want to make it a fully diminished, what you'll do is lower that 7th to what's called a diminished 7th. So you have major 7th, which just sounds weird in this case, minor 7th, and then you lower it one more time and it becomes a diminished 7th. The easiest way to figure out how to play diminished arpeggios on the guitar is just by taking this minor 3rd shape on the same string, so going first finger to pinky note, right, if each finger has a fret, and then go up a tritone, remember, so that's your adjacent string 1 fret above, and do the same thing again. And then the next string, you're going to do the same thing, go up a fret and play that pinky note, and that's the same thing you just played here. It's just an octave above, so now you have a fully diminished arpeggio. And one final trick. Wait a minute, I can't do it right here. Let's somewhere else. If you enjoyed this video, click the subscribe button, because every time you subscribe, you save a fairy's life. And lastly, this book right here, this is what you're gonna need if you're ever on a cruise ship and I don't know, there's some sort of disaster. Not really. So this book I wrote a while ago, and this is all about music theory and the guitar. And without putting too fine of a point on it, basically, it's not even really about music theory. It's about basic musicianship. So learning your intervals all over the guitar is really what it's about. So if things like chords, scales, and even more advanced topics like chord progressions kind of elude you, it's probably because you don't understand the nuances of your intervals. So I would check this out. It's only 15 bucks, and the good thing is all of the etudes in this book, I've recorded myself playing them, and they're on this YouTube channel. That's right. They're under a playlist called Guitar Architecture because it's the coolest name ever, Guitar Architecture. All right, one final trick. I learned this from a Joe Pass transcription. I don't remember which one because I've done a lot of them, and frankly, I love Joe Pass's music. So you'll hear guitar players like Joe Pass play this sort of thing with diminished chords, where you'll basically take this fully diminished 7th chord voicing here and play it up a minor third, and it's an inversion of itself. Right? So if you take, for instance, that same blues that I was playing, 2, 3, that sort of thing, where you take all of the voicings and use them as filler for that sharp 4 diminished bar, it makes it sound like you're playing a lot of really complicated stuff, but you're not. You're just moving your hand up the inversions. So, little pro tip right there. And of course you can do it on your upper strings as well if you'd like. So you can do, like that as well. That's another chord soloing trick. So, Joe Pass tip trick for free. There you go.